This small workshop in Pakistan uses recycled scrap metal to produce affordable and durable engine cylinder liners. They melt the scrap and cast it into molds. These liners are ready for use after some basic machining on a lathe. This small workshop in Peshawar, Pakistan, is the only local production base for cylinder liners. The craftsmen work against the clock to increase production, casting molds for the liners. Despite the small outer diameter, a single metal sand mold can hold 4 liners. After confirming the spacing between the solid molds, the craftsman fills the entire sand mold box with mixed sand. To prevent voids that could cause casting failures, they stir the sand with an iron rod after adding each layer, ensuring the sand settles to the bottom. When the sand is fully packed, they compact it tightly. If the liner molds are well made, the likelihood of defects is minimized. Once the craftsman smooths the base of the mold, they sprinkle talcum powder on the surface to facilitate separation from the second mold layer. Then, they place a thinner upper mold, fill it with sand, and compact it to ensure the liner's head forms correctly. The craftsman quickly and skillfully made the molds for the cylinder liners, separating them and creating 4 hollow spaces in the sand mold. However, the sand is not ready for pouring yet, as the inside of the cylinder liners needs to interact with the pistons. The craftsman fixes a pre-made sand core at the bottom to ensure the liners aren't solid. When the core aligns with the mold's holes, the core creates space for pouring. Once the cylinder liner molds are assembled, the craftsmen place all the scrap iron into their melting furnace. The furnace's high temperature melts the scrap into molten iron. The craftsman schemes off any impurities floating on the surface at this high furnace temperature to ensure the molten iron is clean enough to cast the liners. After an hour of heating, the molten iron is ready for casting. They pour it into their special ladle, and while the sand mold holds for liners, the thickness of each liner doesn't require much molten iron, allowing one ladle to cast an entire row of liners. Once the mold is filled with molten iron, waiting for the liners to cool before demolding is unnecessary. Due to limited space, the hot liners are moved outside immediately to free up the metal sand mold for more casting. After cooling for a day and night, the liners are ready for cleaning. The high heat makes the sand blocks brittle, but a light tap from a hammer easily breaks them away. The liners are then sent to the workshop for machining. Since the freshly demolded blanks are rough and don't match the final product dimensions, the craftsman begins by trimming the cylinder liner. Though machining on the lathe reduces the liner's thickness, space for this was accounted for during the casting process, explaining the difference between the blank and the final product. After the craftsman performs a rough cut on the inner wall, they trim the liner surface to make it as smooth as possible. Though the lathe has machined the inner and outer sides once, the liners still don't meet the precision required for use. The inner wall undergoes a second delicate machining process to improve the finish. Changing the lathe tool makes the inner wall smoother and more uniform. However, the surface of the liner still needs polishing with a grinding stone, assisted by cutting fluid, to achieve the final smooth finish. Once the oil stains are cleaned with wood ash, the engine cylinder liner from scrap metal is complete. If you were to rate the Pakistani craftsman's work on the engine cylinder liner, how many points would you give out of 10?